I hope everybody had a great break. I heard several of you saying that your roundtable conversations were amazing, so that's great. And our next session, we're really pleased to have RightNow Media as one of our sponsors. Right Now at Work, something that just rolled out here recently. We have Brent Lastinger here with RightNow Media with us. And you know, when we got to this session where we really wanted to put the why in perspective, we thought about who could we have that could come and speak to this. And we all settled on the fact that, you know what, Right Now has some amazing content. And one of the stories is the Green family. And I know that Brent's going to set that up for you in a minute and talk about that. But really, while everybody's still filing back in and Brent gets ready to come up, I want you to take a couple minutes and check out the story about RightNow Media at Work.
Our relationships, our work environment, in every aspect of our lives. But it's a constant struggle. Life is complicated. Relationships are difficult. Challenges pop up in our marriages, with our kids, our finances. There's always something. That's why your company has subscribed to a new resource called RightNow Media at Work to give you free access to an online library of faith-based video resources that can help you build a healthier life. Experts like Dave Ramsey, Chip Ingram, and Les and Leslie Parrott teach on marriage, parenting, finances, dealing with stress and conflict, and many other topics. Develop your leadership skills with John Maxwell, Patrick Lencioni, Marcus Buckingham, David Green, Cheryl Batchelder, Bill Hybels, Andy Stanley, and many others. There's even a great library of fun and safe programming for your kids. You work hard. You devote a ton of quality time, energy, and effort to your job. This is a way we hope we can help you lead fulfilling lives in and away from the office. A free video library that's there if you need it, anytime, on any device. Think of it as a coach, counselor, teacher, chaplain, and even a babysitter, all rolled into one. We hope it contributes to the health and well-being of you and your loved ones.
Well, thank you guys so much for having RightNow Media with you guys today. I'd like to thank my beautiful wife, Ashley, my two beautiful boys, Judah and Asher, that's allowed me to be with you guys today. How many has ever heard of RightNow Media? Almost everybody. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, our mission is very simple. It's to help people, business leaders, employees, trade in the American dream for a world that desperately needs Christ. How many know that we have people in our workplace that need to know a little bit more about Christ, helping them connect their faith to the workplace? And so what I want to show you guys today is we partnered with a small company called Hobby Lobby. How many has ever heard of Hobby Lobby? Hobby Lobby is kind of small like me. Last year, I don't know if you guys followed them, but they actually faced some pretty tough scrutiny within their company. To where our Supreme Court was wanting them to offer abortion pills in their clinics due to the Affordable Health Care Act. David Green is a man of faith. He's a man of integrity. In fact, the whole company is. And it was very interesting to me that you guys will see here in the documentary that how many has ever got maybe in a situation, maybe in your business or life, and they said, you have to do this or you have to give it up? See, David was in that situation that, you know, battling the Supreme Court and battling our judicial systems and battling our government with you know, what they were wanting to offer. And their plan was, you know what, if it don't work out in our favor, God, you've allowed us to have this business for the time that we've had it, and we appreciate it. But if this is what it's going to come down to, there's a scripture that said, don't be conformed with the things of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so, David, you're going to see a lot of the practices and you know, adding work, you know, to this documentary and the ways that he incorporated faith and work. So we're going to show you a little short clip here that's going to give part of the Hobby Lobby documentary, part of the Hobby Lobby decision, and you guys enjoy.
Hobby Lobby already covers birth control for its employees. Its issue is with requirement in Obamacare to cover emergency contraception as well. The company, Hobby Lobby, objects to 4 drugs: the morning after pill, Plan B, Ella, and 2 forms of IUDs.
In our country, people have all kinds of different beliefs on when life begins. We happen to believe that life begins at conception. And so we felt it was a violation of our religious liberties to be asked to pay for something that we felt took life.
And at the time, there was other challenges in the court system to the whole healthcare law. And so we said, well, we don't know if it's going to really impact us or not.
But it finally came to the point where, well, no, this is what's going to happen. The government is going to require us, in our belief, that life begins at conception, that there's a DNA that's happened at conception that has never been before and never will be again. And they were asking us that we were going to have to pay for these prescriptions, and we knew as a family that that just could not be, that we just could not do that. And we knew that at the same time that if we didn't do that, because of the numbers of employees that we had on our insurance plan, that it could cost us as much as $1.3 million a day.
The fine was $100 per day per affected individual. There, I believe, is probably some question as to exactly how that would be calculated. But based upon the number of individuals that were insured on our health care plan, that could be as much as $1.3 to $1.7 million a day. During this period of time, our plan is growing, so the more people we have in our plan, the higher our fine would be. So it's $100 per employee per day, so we're looking at $1.3 million a day. That's pretty substantial.
And at that time, we decided that we just had to, here again, call the family together. And we do that when we feel like that something's going to happen that affects all of us. As before, when we felt like we were going to lose our company, we brought our family together. We knew that this could cost us our company as well.
We actually met in my home. My dad asked me to call a meeting, so I did. So we brought Gen 1, that's my mom and dad, Gen 2, my brother and sister, our spouses, and then Gen 3, between me and my brother, we have 10 children, and those who are probably 18 or older came.
And I asked the youngest to speak first, and I wanted to be the last one to speak to see how the family felt.
It was a bit surprising that something of this sort was ahead of us because we're a craft store, Hobby Lobby's a craft store. And so it was kind of a little bit of a weird thing to enter into.
It wasn't a decision that we were chasing after. We weren't trying to make a splash in culture. We were just faced with the decision of, okay, what's the right thing to do and how do we serve our employees well?
You know, the thought that came to my mind was the story of Daniel. The first time when he was challenged, it was to eat meat that violated Jewish law. And he appealed, and the problem was averted. He was allowed not to violate his conscience. The second time, Daniel was told that he couldn't pray to his God. And in that case, he had to face the lion's den, and God showed up, and God delivered. But I thought there was a third option as well, sometimes that God allows people to go through suffering. Stephen was stoned. Job did lose it all. The disciples, all but one of them, lost their life. Christ did die on the cross.
Sometimes we don't know. We're called to obey. Sometimes the outcome through obedience is tough. There are tough results to obedience.
The consensus and by the end of that meeting, when we're talking about it, it was like, there's really no other choice but for us to follow the Lord and what we believe about life.
And I was so proud of them that they had the same heart. There was no conversation of how are we going to pay for these, but what can we do not to pay for these prescriptions?
So we said, well, if we have to, it's not our preference, we don't want to do it, we honor our government, we live in a great place. It was because we have the kind of government we do that we're able to be successful in America. But at the same time, now we're being asked by that same government that we do respect and want to uphold to do something, and so we felt like our only choice was to sue and ask that we not do this.
When we came out of the meeting, we all knew that it may cost us the company. In fact, one of the comments the strongest comment was from my son, Stephen. he says we have to be willing to give up this company.
Whether it was averted or delivered or suffered, I just had a sense that whatever God's plan was, we were in good hands, whatever happened. And there was a certain peace in knowing that we were doing what we knew was the right decision.
It may be God's will that we give up this company, that if it served him best, then that's what we wanted. Not what served us best, but what would serve God best. And so that week we came out of the meeting, everybody knew that we had no promises that we could keep our business.
The Greens had no recourse whatsoever. They were facing ruinous fines. There are times when you have to go to court. I know that the Apostle Paul said, "Why are you suing one another?" But guess what? The Apostle Paul also invoked litigation, right? He said, "I appeal to Caesar." One of my favorite as a lawyer. He appealed to Caesar. He could have just said, "Well, I can't litigate." No, he didn't say that. He said brothers shouldn't be litigating with one another. So the government forces were arrayed against the Apostle Paul. He used his legal remedies. And that's exactly what Christians are called upon to do. So I applaud the Greens for saying, we don't want to do this. Please don't make us do this. You're making us do this. We have no alternative but to go to court.
This was really one of the most outrageous sort of overreaches by the federal government against religious freedom in the history of our country. The Solicitor General argued that once you decide to go into a for-profit business, you are making the decision to waive your religious freedoms. And, quote, you now play by the government's rules. Nothing could be more the opposite of why this country was founded. It was founded on religious freedom.
The Greens became objects of very severe criticism, and they're sincere Christians who are holding their beliefs. So there was a certain backlash, but that's where we are in the culture today, that you say, well, I have a religious freedom right. Well, then I don't like religious freedom.
As a woman in the family, to hear other people saying that we disliked women, it was frustrating. And there were times that I would just have to, I took a Facebook sabbatical, which is necessary because there are a lot of people that would say something. But there's great understanding for the value of women within our family. And within our family, there are a lot of women that have a great strength in who we are. I think my grandma, she's, this rock within the family. My grandpa's a rock in my family. My grandma is a rock in my family. There's not a one is better than the other, one has worked harder than the other. It's understood that Grandpa has a deep love for Grandma, and Grandpa dotes on Grandma. And I've always seen women having a lot of worth and value, not any more than men or less than men. God created them both equal. Life is valued, women are valued, and they come from the same source, God's word.
Our country was very divided on this issue. If you saw the polls, about half the people favored, about half the people didn't. 10% were very passionate about it, and 10% were very, on both ends and stuff. And so I said, we became zeros to 10% of the population and heroes to another 10%, and the 80% just kind of life went on, even though they had their opinions and stuff. So for the most part, for our family, we just said the best thing is just to go on, not to make comments about it, and let's just let the process take care of itself.
Through the entire litigation, that family did not have a plan B. I had no earthly idea what we were going to do if we lost. I was still working on ideas, but I can't begin to tell you the number of employees or people that would come up to me and ask me, if you lose, what's going to happen? What are you going to do? I often prayed for David as the leader of this family. I just can't fathom the burden with the 20,000+ employees that rely on this company for their livelihood. I marvel at his faith.
For my wife and I, it was almost terrifying. But it was a very short time after that we had peace. And people would come up to us and say, wow, this has got to be difficult, da-da-da. And we just said, no, we're at total peace. And we really contributed that to the prayers that we were receiving from all over the world.
I was at a meeting, I believe it was in Singapore, and I sat next to a guy, and he's from India, And he sees my name tag, he goes, oh, Mark Green. Well, how are your kids doing? How's Brent? He knew all 4 of my kids' names, all this stuff. And I was a little spooked, to be honest. I'm like, wow, how come you know all this stuff? And he goes, wow, I'm following your case, you know? I mean, because what happens in America, it affects me in India, you know? Because what you guys do has ripple effects and stuff. So I've been praying for you and your family. And so I told people we were probably there for a while, maybe the most prayed for family in the world. And so that's quite affirming because we believe in the power of prayer. And so to know that the world was praying for you was very encouraging. And so we were able to walk with peace through the process, knowing that we did all that we could. We were standing for what we thought was right, and we'll let the chips fall where they may.
We had one decision, right or wrong, and we made the right decision, so that was one of the reasons why I think we were at peace, because what else could I have done?
When we sued the government, obviously we had no idea that it would wind up going to the Supreme Court, but slowly but surely it went to one court here, one court there, and through time and providence, it wound up that our case was taken.
I was working feverishly to figure out how we're going to do this. Are there any options for us if we were to lose that we could live with? And nothing. I mean, I tried, and I'd visit with the family, and we could never, there was just not an acceptable alternative. And at the end of the day, it was either win or lose. And if it was lose, I think we were just going to have to sit down and figure out what's next.
We knew our case was probably the very last decision for the Supreme Court because it was one of the largest decisions that they had to make for that year, if not the largest. And so we were at the last hour, the last day that the Supreme Court met for that year, we were the case. And so we were in the conference room as a family sitting there waiting.
Seemed like the decision was probably going to be 5-4 one way or another. So you don't go in with a lot of confidence because 5-4 is close. You know, you're down to about one vote. Which way is it going to go?
I kind of consider myself maybe a little bit of the business historian. So I had cameras and photographers in there to film the moment because this was something that was, well, as we all know, it's historical, not only for this company, but for this country. So I had this all filmed. We were all sitting around the table watching the news feed, and it was a very convoluted opinion.
I'll read part of that decision for you now. The Supreme Court ruled today that closely held companies cannot be required to pay to cover some types of contraceptives for their employees. Now, those closely held companies, that means that
we saw 5-4 in our favor. You know, it was a time of rejoicing for our family.
The God we serve is able to deliver us. The God we serve, and He's delivered us.
We were all just very, very thrilled that God had delivered us.
There was a great sense of joy. I think there were some shouts out of the room there at the corporate office, and just gratefulness, a sense of pride in our country and the fact that we continue to stand for the religious freedoms that our founders originally gave us.
There were lots of tears, and we all stood up, and of course, Barbara led us in prayer, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. And, you know, simply put, the Supreme Court ruled that closely held corporations have rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which means they can claim religious rights under the First Amendment. We didn't win anything that we didn't already have because the First Amendment gave us that. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything in the world. To see the strength of the Green family, the unwavering strength, changed my life.
At the end of the day, the win was for the unborn. This was all about not winning and losing with the government. It was all about life. It was about the unborn that we felt like that God would have us to protect. I think God gives all of us a talent, and some of us 5, as the Bible says, some 1, and so forth. I think He only gave me 1, and I recognize that I am a merchant. And I don't take credit for that. Whatever we have in our talents, God gave them to us. My mother and dad had good intentions because they wanted us to do something that was eternal, but I just don't think they understood that we could also be in ministry outside of being a pastor or an evangelist. And so it was very, very difficult for me, and I just felt like I was a second-class Christian.
As he started the ministry side of our business and started giving and saw God using that, and it became very real to him that he was where God wanted him.
Of course, now I know I'm in my calling, and God has called me to do this. But when I think back on it, I think that my calling was whatever. Sometimes we're worried about what God wants us to do, and I think he's more concerned about how we do it. I think the scriptures tells us it's the whatever that your hands finds to do. Just do the very best you can, and do it as unto the Lord. I think it's in that environment and that obedience that we find out what God has for us eventually, down the road, ultimately. But I don't think we will find it necessarily if we have a job that we're not doing the very best we can, because that is not what we feel like God calls us to do.
I appreciate the fact that he has learned from that for us, and none of us have really ever been pressured or pushed to become something. It was more freedom to say, what is God calling you to do? You go do that and be the best you can.
When I come to work now, I know that I have a calling on my life. In fact, I tell my wife sometimes, you know, I feel God's anointing on my life. So I think as a merchant, I can have the same anointing coming to work as a pastor in the pulpit.
Here is the best way I can tell you the values of this company. One day I got a call from our CFO, and we were having managers meetings. He said, well, one of our chaplains was telling her story and giving her testimony and doing an altar call, asking people to accept Christ in their life if they would. And he said, Peter, I think you should know about this. And obviously, as a lawyer, you know, my antenna go up, and I immediately called our executive vice president over operations and said, look, we need to get together with David. We need to talk about this. I went through this whole litany and parade of horribles, if you will. And I said, this could cost us millions of dollars in legal fees and lawsuits. And David calmly listened to me the whole time. And after I was finished, he looked at Ken and he said, Ken, how many of these managers have given their life to Christ so far? And Ken said, 8. And David looked at me and said, you know, I appreciate you doing your job, but can you tell me, what's the price of a soul? Well, at this point in time, I mean, tears are running down my face, and I just stand up and shake his hand and said, thank you. I just needed to let you know. That's the values at Hobby Lobby.
Thank you so much for watching that. What do you guys think? Amen. One of the things that he says there at the end is, what is the price of a soul? I think a lot of businessmen and business leaders, we can look at ourselves and we can maybe identify some areas in our heart that maybe there's some conviction there from that comment. What is the price of a soul? There are 7 million businesses in the U.S. with only 350,000 churches. Everybody doesn't have a pastor. They don't have an adult small group teacher. They don't have a youth group, but everybody has a boss. Everybody wakes up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and they have a boss. You guys will have more people pass through your hallways in a single day that might attend a local church in a year. And when fewer people are turning to the church for their problems, they're turning to the world. Well, one of the most frustrating things to me is a guy that travels the northeastern, the southeastern parts of the United States, and I hear businessmen, they say, Brent, this is good, but this isn't good for our business. This isn't a good thing because people won't watch it. What that tells me is, me and my wife, we pastor a church in Dallas, Texas, and I see people every Sunday, and how often do you have people that walk up to you, maybe there's some other pastors in here and said, you know, Pastor, my day was just horrible, my week was horrible, I faced this and my wife treated me this way, or my husband treated me this way, or I lost my job. We never have people that come up and tell us that at church. All we see is smiles, and they shake our hand and they'll have their cup of coffee and they'll go on about their life. But I dare ask you, how many people that pass your hallways every single day are just broken inside? Maybe with bitterness, maybe battling with marriage issues, maybe battling with financial issues, maybe battling struggles that our fathers and our grandfathers have faced. I heard a pastor say, he said, if you don't kill the very thing that you struggle with, all it's gonna do is intensify, and then your children are gonna deal with it. And then if they don't deal with it and kill it, and then it's gonna intensify. See, we battle our minds, we battle principalities, and we battle darkness on a day-to-day basis. Where are your employees turning to? They're turning to the world. And what we found in creating RightNow Media Work that we launched last year is that people are turning to YouTube, and they're turning to Google, and they're turning to all of these other solutions to try to find answers to their problems. But what they find is people that have dealt with the same thing but never had closure or never dealt with their issue. More or less now they're encouraging each other's issues. RightNow Media at Work is a platform that is kind of broken off of RightNow Media, which is our church platform. Our church platform has 15,000 videos for pastors, for youth pastors, for small group teachers, for different leaders in the church. RightNow Media at Work is dealing with personal care, dealing with marital issues, dealing with financial issues, dealing with mental health issues, with things of the world today, things that we struggle with, things that we deal with. Now, these are all video-based resources. There's no books on there. There's no other resource on there, but it's just video-based resources to take leaders to pour into other people's lives. Right now, we have an app on the Android market, the iPhone market, the Apple TV, Roku, and we're working on some different other platforms to be able to allow streaming. So on the church side, and then also on RightNow Media at Work, we have about 3 million users. Now we look at that and we say, out of those 3 million users, how many people are we actually reaching out of those users? We like to say that every person is about 7 to 8 people. Can you imagine if maybe Francis Chan talking about the book of the Bible, talking about the book of James, or maybe the Hobby Lobby documentary that we just shown impacted somebody's life to where it became tangible, and there was a fire that erupted inside of them. This is for everybody. This isn't just for your pastors. This isn't just for your CEOs. This isn't just for your CFOs and your executives and large companies or medium-sized companies. This is for every single person. We deal with businesses that have 1 employee to businesses that have 30,000 employees. So in closure, I want to challenge you guys. I know that some of you are probably sitting there and saying, man, that's great, but it just doesn't sound good to me. Just doesn't sound like it's gonna fit our business. I'm gonna leave you with this. What is the price of a soul? God bless you. Thank you.